Hello, I'm Chuck Martin, and welcome to the Voices of the Internet of Things. With me today is Jake Leeman, Senior Technical Strategist at the Sandbox Agency, which is operations in the U.S. and Canada. Jake has been Creative and Digital Strategy Operations Director at Vision 3, where he also has been a Senior Digital Producer, Interactive Project Manager, and Assistant Creative Director. Jake's area of focus at Sandbox include virtual and augmented realities as they relate to experiential marketing. Welcome here, Jake.
Hey, thanks, Chuck. Nice to be here.
So can you start by just giving our listeners a little background on what Sandbox actually is?
Yeah, so Sandbox is we're an advertising and marketing agency. We've got, I believe 7 locations now, all over the U.S. and Canada, as you mentioned, and we've got a number of large clients, kind of, very diverse, all the way, from agriculture to animal health to consumer electronics. So it's a kind of a wide variety of industries and expertise.
And what is your role in the organization?
Sure. I'm a senior technical strategist. So my area of focus is really around marketing technology. So for any of our clients, really, when they need to do something that's a little more technical, involving VR and AR, as you mentioned, all the way down to application development or whatnot, I can provide kind of the strategic insight, both working with the client and then our internal teams to create solutions that are going to, solve the problems that the clients may have and communicate to the users well. So
let's start with some of the realities. Can you give us a view of sort of the state of virtual reality today?
Sure. Yeah. So I think that the technology is changing so fast. It seems like every week there's some new article about new hardware, software, or improvements just within the space. It's a fascinating area, and I love being a part of it. Virtual reality in particular, I think, is as specifically compared to augmented reality, it is. In its infancy. It's probably more like in the toddler stage of technology, if you will. It's still largely embraced by people that are really into tech. It's not got the consumer adoption that I think everyone wants it to have. So it's a really interesting space to see how people are using the technology and trying to bridge that gap, both from hardware, which I think there's great strides being making in right now actively by several companies, and then on the consumer side, creating software and experiences that are engaging and effective.
So, but VR is not really new. It's been around, well over a decade, at least in the gaming area. Well, what is it that's making it more sort of consumer friendly today?
Well, okay, that's a great question. So let me give you a little bit of background / history, just how I've observed it from being in this industry for about 15 years. So we've all, at my previous position, we were involved in marketing technology executions day in, day out, all the way back when everything was Flash. Flash was everywhere on the internet.
Flash,
CDs,
wow.
Yeah, CD-ROMs were still a thing. Yeah, so we've always been highly focused on, that visual storytelling through an interactive medium. That's kind of my bread and butter, if you will. And we know, you've heard about VR. Like you said, I think it's technically been around even longer, like maybe 20 years or so in some respects. But about 2 years ago, when it was after the Oculus Rift Kickstarter, those had all been delivered, to tech geeks everywhere that had kind of backed that. You started to hear a little bit of buzz, but it was very rare to know someone that had it. And then even for us as an interactive shop, I think only one of our developers had it at the time. And it was a novelty. It made you sick, the motion sickness because of the resolution. There were just a lot of issues with the hardware, but inside that experience, you could see a glimmer of, hey, there's something here. But there is a technical hardware issue before this could be something that we could really use on a consumer level, on a business level. And then in the past couple years with HTC obviously new versions of the Oculus, and then even VR in the mobile space, the technology itself has grown so much, so fast, with its ability to provide clear resolutions and motion tracking, that a lot of the issues that affected the user experience with motion sickness and just discomfort have largely been resolved. So the technology's ability to provide this virtual world and this clear landscape that you can really just lose yourself in has the technology has finally met the vision of, if you will, of what VR can provide.
And can you distinguish a bit between the cardboard approach of you putting a phone in a headset versus immersive VR with an HTC Vive, that sort of thing?
Sure. Yeah. So mobile VR is kind of the term I'll use. Mobile VR is getting better and better. There's the Samsung Gear and Google Daydream are really the two platforms. There's lots of devices. It's funny because I see devices on sale when I go into stores now. Like at the local big box store, there'll be here's the a VR headset for your phone for $40 or whatever. So it's becoming more pervasive. I would say that some of the technologies, especially Google's Daydream, they're getting really, really good. The only limitation really is battery life and field of view. So what I mean by field of view is, in a phone, if you think about how big a phone is, and it's only sitting, a couple inches from your eyeballs, but its field of view, it's still not wrapping around your peripheral. And so that limits the immersion. What the other headsets will give you, the PC-based virtual reality headsets like the HTC Vive, like the Oculus Rift, they just give you a larger field of view. And I think the resolution is probably a wash, maybe a little higher resolution on the PCs at the moment. But it's really that field of view, which is what provides that feeling of immersion, right? Like where you can, even out of the corners of your eyes, see things going on, in your peripheral, which is how we live every day, which I think is largely responsible for helping break that fourth wall of reality. Like, hey, I really am somewhere else. And the computer-based ones are doing that really well right now.
Isn't there an issue, though, from a consumer standpoint, with cost and for a PC-based VR? I mean, because you need some serious processing power too.
Yes, they do. Yeah, and that's I think it's funny because that space has changed. I mean, it's like any technology, right? Cell phones. Although, if you think about our cell phones now, cell phones when they first came out, crazy expensive, then they got to ridiculously cheap, and now we're back to really our cell phones are as expensive as our computers. We just pay for them differently. I think what's been funny to see in the short lifespan of VR is how aggressive that the technology companies have been at. They know success is going to be based on adoption, and for adoption, the price has to be digestible. So there's two things that I see in the space being done right now. The first is both HTC and Oculus Rift, which are really the two major players, have aggressively over the past 6 months discounted their pricing. So what once was an $800 piece of hardware is now about a $400 package for the VR hardware. You still have to have a computer that can run it, so that's an additional cost, right, of $1,000 or so, or realistically more if you want to do high-level gaming, but it's still an investment. So the other thing that everyone's doing, Microsoft now, is jumping into this game pretty heavily. I think HTC and I know the Google Daydream platform, what it's trying to do is they're all trying to make self-contained VR units that do not need a big PC or computer tethered to the headset to provide the experience. That can be coupled with wireless headset technology to provide a VR experience that is going to be really cost effective and free the user up to experience things without any cords or other ties, if you will, to reality. So It's getting very exciting. I think the lowest prices I've seen on some of the new Windows headsets are in the like $200 range. So the price has, if you think about that, from 800 to 200 in about a year and a half, it's come down quite a bit.
So that's a great view of VR. Can you put augmented reality in perspective for us now?
Sure, yeah. So, and I think a good thing to mention is really the difference, because I know even in my conversations with clients, both at my previous position and now here at Sandbox, there's still I think a lot of misconceptions about what's what, because we've got these three different terms of virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, right? So,
I don't want to get to mixed yet.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. We can save that one. So I'll just cover the first two. So virtual reality really is, I think the biggest distinction between it and augmented is, your interactions. Your interactions are with virtual objects in a virtual world, right? Everything is not present, if that makes sense. The difference that AR has is that you are interacting with virtual objects in the real world. Okay, so there is some grounding in reality, if to use that term, between what's digital and what's physical. So that can take place through a phone. Largely right now is the phone, and also I think that's where Google Glass and HoloLens and stuff. That's where definitions start to get real fuzzy about what's what. But it's really that idea of, hey, I can see this virtual thing in my physical space is how I think the industry is accepting the term and how the consumer understands it as well.
Okay, so now let's get into the good stuff. Let's talk about mixed reality. What does that look like?
Sure. So mixed reality it's a bit of a made up term in a way. Microsoft is trying to own the term and trying to brand what they're doing as mixed reality now, and I think it's largely positional. It's a branding term to help differentiate them in the market. In reality, and I've been doing a little research of this as well, so I can speak to clients about it. It's a hybrid, a bit of both. The concept of being able to interact with both real and virtual objects within real and digital space, kind of all at the same time. I think that's what the grand vision of mixed reality is, that it's going to kind of take VR and AR and blend them together. And so it's just this, this perfect blend of the two, if you will, that we as users won't even think about, because it'll just, what we need will be there, whether it's real, whether it's virtual, whatever, it'll all blend together and be perfect. From a practical standpoint right now, mixed reality really is, it really is AR. Usually, though, the idea is that you won't have the physical barrier of like a mobile device. So if you think of AR like, even as simple as the Pokemon Go AR experience was that came out about a year ago. You're holding your phone, you're looking at a picture of the real world that's right in front of you if you look around your phone, but you can see this virtual object in front of it. So that's AR. But there's that whether it's your tablet or your phone, there's this physical device that's in the way, and you have to interact with the physical device, with gestures or your finger or whatever, to have any responsiveness. And the concept, I think, my view of it is with mixed reality, that's where I think the glasses come in. All the way back to Google Glass up to HoloLens with Microsoft now, Apple. So I've been the buzz right this week in the tech news is rumors of Apple's AR glasses that'll be out in 2019 supposedly, and that space. If you think about what they're trying to do, is they're trying to take away the barrier of that, so I can use my hands and gesture naturally to interact with these virtual objects, because the glasses would sense, they'd see the real world. I'm seeing them like I'm wearing my glasses now. Here's these virtual things kind of projected as if they were in reality. And if I want to turn something, I just reach out and turn it, right? So that there is an aspect of natural interaction that the theory of mixed reality will give us, that, traditional AR won't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a company here called PTC here in the Boston area, you probably know. And every year they do a big show. And last year, actually the last 2 years, they show a version of this where very heavy-duty industrial equipment, they'll basically have a hologram, a la Microsoft HoloLens kind of thing. They'll actually project a big generator onto the stage, and then someone will be able to repair it in real time, but it's really virtual.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's where the fascinating aspect of the growth of all these technologies is going to happen in. And not to dive too deep into that, but what I've seen in the space from dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of client conversations over the past 2 years is the training and education space. I believe will be where this technology grows the fastest from a commercial standpoint. You know, why would a business adopt this? You know, there's obviously a very large retail focus for AR right now. There's the IKEA, Amazon, everybody's got an app now that can use AR to show you the product in your own home. That's a practical and great use of AR. But that's direct to consumer. It's in a retail environment. Many businesses, that's not an issue or thing that they need. But what they do have, whether it's a technical process, from software, whether it's mechanical machinery, gadgets, widgets, whatever they are, big or little, they always need to fix them. They always have to train people to make them. They have to train people to use them. There's all the how they work. That space, if you will, is ripe for both VR, AR, mixed reality, all of those to just explode. That's where we've seen most of the interest, I think, that we've seen, that I've seen over the past 2 years has been in, kind of within that space. And these large companies, who don't directly interface with consumers, but, have, gigantic companies with lots of products in the world and in the wild, their appetite and interest for VR and AR applications in training and education is enormous, and I think it's going to be really exciting to see how people learn, over the next 3, 4, 5 years, how much that shifts as the technology gets adopted, as it gets cheaper to implement, and its usage more widespread. I think it's going to be pretty exciting.
So from a client standpoint, I know you deal with a lot of clients. How much technology can they handle these days? What are they looking for? Are they sort of ignoring the technology and saying, bring me a solution? Or are they enamored with the technology and say, let's match this to something? That is a great question. I've seen it both ways. There are, and I think, that's obviously comes down to, a personal viewpoint by whoever you're interacting with, I think. But I've seen we've had clients that love the idea of the technology and want to find a use for it. And I think those clients are, you're more tech savvy or more aware of what's going on, kind of at the edge of marketing, if you will, and want to be in that spot. At the same time, you'll have other clients or businesses that are just wanting the best solution. And I think that group, I've seen some surprising, in a positive way, some surprising feedback on, being open to some of these technologies that are, it's a little complicated and it's costly to invest in, to build if you think about building a training or an education platform in VR, let's say, it's a big deal, right? But what it does and the practical applications of its impact are so great and so pronounced that they're really interested. Like, it doesn't scare them off, which I think is it's really positive for the space at large. Who typically leads in this? I know this could be some of both, but like you paint a picture of the client leading the agency or the agency leading the client.
All I can speak to is my personal experience, and what I've seen is, for the majority of use cases, it's been the agency leading. There's various degrees of awareness on the client side, ranging from people who have done it and love it to they've never experienced AR, VR before at all. But I do see that, that's, what I see my position as and what the modern, progressive marketing and advertising agencies can do. We have to be, it's not about taste making, if you will. It's not, this isn't, how to make the next best, TV ad or radio spot. When you talk about these things that are more experiential and connecting, brands, products, whatever it is, to our consumers, and our end audiences, there's a level of involvement, of complication, of depth to these things that are, to me, are a little outside the normal bounds. And it's our job, I think, to know it, to understand it, to be the consultants that can guide our clients towards the best solution, right? Like, even within this very limited subset of technology we're talking about with VR, AR, MR, you've got to really understand each one, the pros and cons, and be able to provide true, logical, practical advice on which one's best for your client situations. And I think that's our job as good marketers is to be that voice for our client partners. And I think that's something we do really good here at Sandbox as well.
For VR, is an issue for the client's installed base? Because obviously more people have a smartphone that could do basically mobile-based VR versus PC-based VR.
Yeah, absolutely. So like between VR and AR, because if you really think about when the technologies kind of exploded, VR had probably 6 months or so of explosion before AR did. AR really exploded in the public consciousness with Pokemon Go last year. And even though you could argue that it's a poor case of AR, it's a game based more on location and position than actual AR usage, still it got it on everybody's mind. And even though VR had that head start, and so it's had more time to like live and breathe as a technology, the mobile space is the one that has accelerated even more rapidly. And now that especially, and this may be getting a little too tech geek for you, but especially with the ability now to do AR that actually where the cameras can sense what's a table, what's a floor, what's a wall for you. Like the technology a year ago, you would have to position all that manually as the user. You would have to move it and scale it and try to get it to look right in your room if you were trying to put a lamp on your desk. Now with ARKit from Apple and ARCore from Google, the camera and the technology and the software can do all that for you. It can give you that lamp on your desk at the right size, sitting on your desk as if it was really there. And that technology improvement over the past 6 months, and now that Apple's released it, ARCore is going to be released in more phones early next year. The user base for really good AR experiences is exploding. So, everybody already had a smartphone. And now what these Google and Apple have done is basically turned the key and unlocked all this potential. Whereas VR kind of has to play catch up because they still need that hardware to get out and be more pervasive before I think it experiences the same kind of rapid explosion of interest and usage.
In the future, isn't the technology going to be able to see more than a human?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the what's been fascinating to me over the past couple years is when I watch a movie now, a sci-fi movie or whatever, and you see these visualizations of what the future is going to be like, and think of Blade Runner is out now, so think of Blade Runner both now and think of it 20, 30 years ago when it was made. All these these screens floating in the air and these giant billboards and all these things that people have been visualizing as what a sci-fi future looks like. we've effectively got the technology to do that. It won't be kind of realized how everybody thought. It's not like we walk downtown and see all the signage floating like without technology. But if we look at our reality, our real world through the lens of AR and VR and these other technologies, that vision of an immersive world where data is at our fingertips and at our eyeballs, really, at a moment's notice. It's really intriguing to see how that's going to change the face of how we as humans interact with the world. Because now when you look at that thing, whatever it is, a product, piece of fruit, whatever, hey, you can have some software somewhere help you sense it, see it. Oh, look, this is a such and such, and here's what it does. Here's how old it is. Here's the price of it. All that stuff is just automatic now, right? And that is going to, I think, really be interesting to explore over the next few years.
So you're always looking at new stuff. In your opinion, is some technology today being developed with a purpose, or is it just being developed and then people like you say, oh, this is what I can do with this?
You know what? That is a great question. I think at this point that there is a definite purpose to where I see the technology being kind of pushed towards, if you will, by the new advancements and things. And I think that goal is, as silly as the word may be, with the whole, with the idea of mixed reality being this separate thing, I really do see that all the software from both sides, what AR and the companies involved in that are trying to do, and what VR and the companies involved in that are trying to do, is really create that blended mixed reality experience. And every new advancement is something that helps you feel like you're not wearing and using technology, right? So like the headsets of a year ago were tethered and had all these cords and needed a giant computer. Well, now we're getting ready to have headsets that don't have any wires. That removes a barrier. Okay, now think about what Apple's trying to do with the AR glasses. Okay, cool. Now that's going to remove a whole nother barrier. Now I don't have to hold my phone. Now I can see my information just by wearing, if you already have glasses or these special glasses or whatever. Like, there's really everything that I've seen in the space seems almost devoted to that idea of let's make it cheaper, more accessible, and let's reduce the barriers between our user and these virtual objects, if you will.
So in the future, are you seeing people wearing AR/VR, mixed reality, whatever glasses, not Google Glass, but sort of a next generation of that?
I think it'll happen, and I think that it may take somebody like Apple to be able to push that into the public space, right? Like, one of the biggest issues I was just reading about, kind of like the downfall of Google Glass last week, I believe, and the idea of that red dot staring at people, and they would see you, and you'd see these weird glasses on you, and then they'd see this red dot. And they knew they were being recorded. It was like, it was in your face. It was a little clunky, and it really bothered people, like an invasion of privacy. So I think that if someone, and maybe Apple is the one to do this, if someone can create that where it is not as invasive, where it's a little more passive, where if you can figure out a way to blend that into whether the glasses that I'm wearing because I have to wear glasses, or some glasses that don't feel like a tech device, make it subtle and passive, and it's just truly augmenting my world and not really interfering with everybody else's, and they don't know that I'm using it per se, that will be I think the key to unlocking widespread public adoption of that kind of technology. As long as it's a little more, in your face and obnoxious in a way, I think it'll always have that barrier of, hey, what are you doing? Why are you using that? Don't use it here.
Boy, wait till facial recognition is built into that. So you go to a cocktail party and you just look at people and you know exactly who they are and their background.
Yeah. Well, think about, and that's why, that is part of why, what Apple's doing is so intriguing to me, because, the new phone, the X, is, really embrace the facial recognition technology. And if you think about that, okay, now they have that technology. Things like the Microsoft Kinect have had it a little bit. There's obviously that technology has existed. And obviously I'm an Apple fanboy by some of the things I'm saying, but what Apple does better than anyone else is take these technologies that already exist and implement them in a user-friendly way that everyone embraces. And if they take their facial recognition capability and then the AR aspect and then what their cameras can do now and put that into glasses that aren't going to be obtrusive and people can wear and not feel weird wearing, and not, people look at you and think what's going on, it is going to be an amazing blend of hardware, software, and our reality, both virtual and physical, just all mashing together in a really, really fun and interesting way.
Last question. What do you see as the role of voice in all of this? I mean, voice assistants are explosive, as you know.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. I think that's the natural progression, right? Like if you can envision a world, I think both in VR, AR, and then in this future of mixed reality, voice control is going to be huge, because you want to have, there's going to be two main ways to control, I think, your experience in any of these situations. One is going to be with your hands, hopefully through some kind of natural gestures. You point at something, it points at something, right? If you could kind of type on a virtual keyboard in the air, hey, you're typing something or whatever. There's going to be use cases for that. But the same thing we're doing now with all of our texts and some of our messaging and everything else. Well, it's much easier just to say, hey Siri, or hey Google, hey Alexa, do this thing, and it happens. So when you combine that power with all this other visualization power, I think it's going to really kind of change the game on how we interface, I think, with all of our technology in general, but especially with these alternate realities. It'll just keep you in that virtual space a little better, right? It's not a disconnect when you have to use a mouse or touch a screen or whatever.
Great stuff. Thank you, Jake Leeman. Thank you all for listening to the Voices of the Internet of Things.
Yeah, thank you.